Hello, Jason. I wanted to start this interview out by giving you a little background for our listeners and our viewers. We have with us today Jason Leen, who has written this book called Peace at Last. It is the afterlife experiences of John Lennon. My name is Shelley Germeau. I write for the Examiner page called John Lennon Examiner. And I understand that, most of the work that I do there is of a non-spiritual, afterlife type thing. But this is a very special interview that we're going to do today with Jason because I read this book back in the late 90s. Because of my own experiences with John. And really, the reason I'm sitting here today writing for the Examiner is because of the communications that I got from John, too. And there was a point where I did go to a psychic myself and say, John's talking to me. I've got these experiences with John Lennon and all these strange coincidences and stuff. Like, what does he want? And one of the first things that psychic said was, well, John is a guide to you. And you know what? If you should read this book. And she had it. She had your book there. And I have to give a little background here because the first time I read it, it did go a little over my head. There's a lot in here that maybe a lot of people wouldn't understand because John is speaking to you from an afterlife realm that isn't like Earth. It's not like what we experience on a daily basis. He doesn't go out for coffee in the morning like I do. He sees other things and he had other experiences. And so let's just begin. Tell me a little bit about what it was like when you first had John contact you. What were you thinking? What did it feel like? What happened?
Okay.
And when was it?
This was 3 days after we can say John passed from the earth. So December 11th, 1980. And at that time, I was living in a very beautiful, little remote location of southwestern Oregon on a very beautiful mountain retreat of 50 acres, completely silent. And so it's like a world separate from the world that we know. And so I was very fortunate to be there. I was raising my 2 children there. And to be honest with your listeners and with your viewers watching us, that I've told this to millions of people around the world in the last 20 years with all of my support work for the book, that I was not a Beatle fanatic. So it wasn't that I used my abilities, and I'll explain that these abilities that enabled me to speak with John, they had existed. I was aware of them for several years. So this was not my first application of those abilities. Mm-hmm. But that when John passed, and for me, I'm a father. So while many of the millions of the world mourn the passing of a Beatle and a musical genius, I cried for his son and for his sons. I cried that in all of the world, they will never have a physical father present. See, there is something that money cannot buy. So I cried for that reason that night. But I didn't go, I've explained to many people, with a little butterfly net into the cosmos and say, now I will go and capture the spirit of John Lennon and see what he has to tell me. So I was not a Beatle fanatic, and I was not motivated. I did not make any personal effort in those first 3 days to speak with John or find out what's up with him or anything. Mm-hmm. Like the rest of the world, I was in a state of mourning in the way that he was killed. But it was on the third night, December 11th. My wife, my young son was in bed. And I was sitting looking at an evening paper. And suddenly, because some of my earlier work involved spirit communication, there is like when your hair raises up, like when you think you've seen a ghost or something unusual, and we have that, in Europe they call it the chicken skin, where the goosebumps on the skin. And so it wasn't that pronounced, my feeling, but there was a sensation in the room that I wasn't alone. And so I didn't have any idea yet who, or if it was true that I was receiving a visitor. It was just a feeling at that moment. So I folded up my paper. I sat very quiet. I was at the edge of a large living room, I don't know how many meters square, but a large area. And suddenly, a masculine voice that I later understood was a very, very specific being that was connecting me to John Lennon. Then he made this masculine being, invisible to me, made a statement. And simply said, "Jason, know your brother John." Now, let me be very clear. I am not in any way biologically related to John Lennon. So here was a spiritual being that was speaking in a larger context of brotherhood. Mm-hmm. And obviously it was, to begin, we were both humans. John had been a human being, so we were related at that level. But at another level, that obviously is why I'm sitting here with you today, my life work and John's life work coincided in some very important way. And this being was indicating that by saying, "Jason, know your brother John." And then I do not have clairvoyant sight. My abilities are called clairaudience, and I will explain that a little bit later. But through the ability to hear beyond a normal human range of hearing, the clairaudience, it is not a fantasy. It is just the same way that a dog can hear a sound that a human cannot hear. I can hear sounds that other people cannot hear. It's as simple as this. So when I heard that voice, it said, "Jason, know your brother John." Then about 10 to 15 feet away from me, in the center of this large living room, briefly materialized the upper torso of John Lennon, exactly the way he looked when he was alive.
Wow.
Now, of course, I'm sitting speechless, but even then, I did not jump into any great hurrah. Here is John, and just taking it for granted that he's come to hang out with me for several years and begin this great work. The most that I could do in my mind, the reaction that I had, the only way that I could fit what was happening to me into a context that, like I just mentioned, in some small way, much, much smaller than John, of course, I had also been involved in world peace, speaking, lecturing in a variety of different subjects to support that general outcome. So when I saw the upper torso of John, I thought to myself, he's making a brief tour around the earth and coming just for a second to say hello to the other people who also were working for world peace. And I thought it was only that. And then the image in 15 or 20 seconds maximum faded. Now, John did not say anything to me. There was no psychic communication. But there was one thing I will never forget. There was a look in his eyes. And it's this look, the only way I can tell you about it, and we've all seen this look. And it's when a friend comes to us on the verge of asking a very, very big favor, the biggest favor they've ever asked from us. And they're a little nervous that we might say no. It's so important to them that we say yes. Mm-hmm. So just before they ask the question, they're nervous that we might say no. That was the look in John's eyes that night. and then he was gone.
Wow.
So then it went 3 more days. And then John came back as a voice. Exactly the same British accent, the same voice that we know as John Lennon on the earth. And then he told me to prepare myself. That he was in a state of transition in the heavens, and that I had been selected because of my abilities were so specific that I could take a message as specific as John was preparing to give me without losing one word, without altering one word of what he would tell me. So John had not selected me in a way that I cannot really tell you how that was accomplished. John was made aware of my abilities once he was in heaven. He did not know my name when he was alive. He knew nothing about my work when he was alive. But from the heavens, we were introduced. And so 3 nights later, he came to me and he said, "You have 30 days. I will be coming back to you in 30 days. And we will begin what he called our great work." And he said, I have been authorized, and I will be preparing to tell you from the moment the bullet struck my body, my entire transition through the tunnel of light, and I will take you on a guided tour with me through all that I will experience and all that I am now experiencing in what humanity calls heaven. So he said, in 30 days, prepare yourself, put all your human things in order, because I will need your constant and dedicated attention to this story until it is finished. And then he was gone. And it's exactly that. 30 days to the night, he returned, and we began the book that you held up, Peace at Last.
Right.
In the 30 years since, 20, since we published in 1989 John's book, Peace at Last, it was never my intention to become a celebrity, around this work. But why I'm here with you today is that in all of these years, I realized that I had an ongoing responsibility. The book is now in 7 languages, and that would not have happened without my efforts. I went and I looked for foreign publishers, and I found people that would bring this message into those languages. So all of that was really to honor the text. It was really to honor John's message that he entrusted me with. And it's the same motivation that brings me in front of you, in front of your readers, in front of the viewers today.